I still remember the day I found out my great-grandmother didn't just die of being really sick like everyone told me. She bled out on a kitchen table because of a botched back alley abortion. Yeah, that's the family secret nobody wanted to talk about until I was 15. Hey Reddit, throwaway for obvious reasons. I'm Olivia, 26F now, but growing up I was just the quiet kid who spent every summer at my grandparents' little house in this tiny rural town in the Midwest. Grandpa Henry was the sweetest man alive. Always had butterscotch candies in his pocket, let me steer the old Ford tractor even though I could barely see over the wheel, and cried at every Hallmark commercial. The one thing he would never talk about was his mom. If I asked, Grandma Patricia would shush me and say, "She got real sick when your grandpa was little, honey. That's all." End of discussion. I figured cancer or tuberculosis or something old-timey like that. Fast forward to sophomore year, we had that mandatory reproductive health day in health class. You know, the one where the boys get sent to the gym and the girls get the period talk. That night, Mom, Susan, and I were eating ice cream on the couch and the topic came up. She got quiet, then said, "You know, your great-grandma didn't actually die of an illness." I was like, "Wait, what?" And that's when the whole thing spilled out. Turns out my great-grandmother, Clara, was married to a guy named George. Everyone just called him the town drunk behind his back. George was a violent alcoholic who cheated constantly and forced himself on Clara even when she begged him to stop. They already had 4 kids they could barely feed. And when she got pregnant again, she panicked. Abortion was illegal. This was the 1930s. So she paid some woman in the next county who used a coat hanger and God knows what else. Clara hemorrhaged for days and eventually died at home because they were too scared to take her to a real doctor. My grandpa Henry was 4 years old. His little sister Grace was 2. Here's where it gets worse. After Clara died, George married one of the women he'd been sleeping with, a real piece of work named Margaret. Margaret moved in, had 3 more kids with George, and then spent the next decade treating Henry and Grace like garbage. She tied them to the kitchen table legs with rope so they couldn't bother her while she fed her own kids. Grandpa told my mom years later that he still remembers watching his half-brothers eat pancakes while he and Grace got cold oatmeal with no milk if they got anything at all. Sometimes Margaret forgot to feed them for a whole day. The neighbors knew, the church knew, nobody did a damn thing because that's just how George's household is. Grandpa left the second he turned 16, lied about his age, and joined the army to get away. He never spoke to George again, cut him off completely, which means when I used to visit my grandparents as a kid and we'd pass this filthy old man staggering down the street yelling at nobody, the one all us kids were told to stay away from, that was my great-grandfather. I probably walked past him dozens of times and had no idea he was blood. Mom only told me because she didn't want me growing up thinking abortion was just some abstract political issue. She wanted me to understand why women sometimes have no good choices. I sat there with a spoon halfway to my mouth, feeling like the floor dropped out from under me. All those years of she was very sick and butterscotch candies and tractor rides, and my grandpa had been carrying this nightmare around since he was 4. That conversation lit a fire under me. I started volunteering at Planned Parenthood when I was 17, got a women's studies minor in college, and now I work full-time for a reproductive rights nonprofit. Every time some politician says, "Just have the baby, adoption is always an option," I think about Clara bleeding out because she was terrified of bringing another child into that house, and I think about 4-year-old Henry tied to a table watching his stepmom feed kids that weren't abused.